Angelo, give me your winners and losers for primary day, June 26th. Who do you think won and who lost all the races?
Well, to me, in terms of the Latino community, what was important was that we maintained our representation in the congressional delegation. Jose Serrano wasn't opposed. Nidia Velasquez was seen as going to be a really tight race, and she pulled it off really well. So that's good because we didn't lose that seniority as a community, and hopefully, the big challenge now is to make sure our community holds these guys accountable and pushes them on all sorts of issues, especially with what's coming up, in November. And what was interesting was even though Espaillat lost in, or maybe not, depends on how the count goes because it's so close. But let's say Espaillat loses in the end up in against Rangel. I think one of the things it did was it's been so close that I think it really puts the Dominican community in a different place politically, and people like Espaillat, I think, are going to be have to be seen as real players in terms of the city's politics, and that's a good thing. So I think even though we may have not gotten a third Latino representative in terms of the congressional delegation in New York, that I think the point was made about the fact that you really can't ignore, the Dominican vote, the Latino vote in Upper Manhattan and parts of the Bronx.
Angelo, chime in quickly on the Obama's decision, obviously with the Dream Act, and also the Supreme Court's decision on Obamacare or affordable health care.
Well, there were a number of positive things that occurred in the last few weeks that I think we're not used to. We've been getting so many negative developments. I think the fact that after all the pressure in the Latino community with the president around the issue of the deportations, the high number of deportations, and his insistence over the years that he couldn't do nothing about this, that's the law. The fact that he came out with this immigration order in terms of dealing with the young people who were brought here without papers by their parents was a great victory for the Latino community. But it's as the Republican said, it is a temporary stopgap measure because the eligibility for deferring the deportation is only like they have to reapply every 2 years. So we don't know what's going to happen in 2 years. So one big question is if you fill out all the paperwork and basically declare formally to the government that you're here illegally and that your parents are here illegally, what happens if all of a sudden the policy changes or there's another president, and does that mean you and your whole family get deported? It's not clear how that's going to work. So it was a victory to a certain level, but then it also raised all sorts of questions. And the hope is that it all really puts real pressure on the Congress to basically pass a comprehensive immigration reform. The same thing was interesting with the whole thing with Obamacare, so-called Obamacare. And that is that the expectation was that the Supreme Court was really going to knock it down, and it really didn't, and that surprised everybody. And they were looking at how basically the politics of it within the Supreme Court was so unexpected that the conservative Chief Justice would basically side with the liberal members in a very unexpected way. And so what you have is this, still a lot of uncertainty because some things were supported and said to be constitutional. Other aspects of it were not, like the expansion of the Medicaid program. But the problem is that now the devil is in the details. Now we have to figure out what this all means. And one of the things that's become very clear is that the Obama administration has, over the years, last 2 years, has done a horrible job of explaining, the program. The Affordable Care Act. It seems so convoluted, so complicated, and the message hasn't been really clear. That there's a lot of confusion about that. So the big challenge now is for the president to embrace these changes that he wants to see, and basically be a lot clearer in terms of his explanation. Because within the Latino community, we are the most affected by those changes. Over 30% of Latinos are uninsured in terms of health insurance. So we're the community that's going to be most affected, and And there were problems also with this act, this Obamacare, because it excludes people who are here undocumented, and those are people that, whether you like it or not, are going to be using the health system. Whether it's emergency rooms anyway, and some people are arguing, look, they should be covered under this, this act. So we have still, some positive things have happened, but we still have a long way to go, and the struggle continues in terms of, holding these guys accountable, getting details and on what these things mean, and basically making sure that, there's an administration in the White House that's really going to work on behalf of our community.
Angelo, last question. What happened with the independent redistricting? Did Latinos get shortchanged again?
Well, there was no independent redistricting going on at all. I mean, it was like a very shameful process that wound up being basically going to the courts, and the courts basically, judges were the ones who drew the lines. So there was really a big waste of time. Public hearings were held. People were talking to the legislature. They never came up with any plan to develop an independent commission. And so there was a lot of playing back and forth. And what you wound up basically was with the status quo. You didn't wind up with any the kinds of changes we like to see. Latinos should have been in a position, for example, to have 3 solid congressional districts and more assembly and state senate districts than we wound up having. So, this was a bit of a wash, so we did the best we could to kind of, protect our community's interests during this process. But it was a mess. It was a complete mess. And the hope is that, by the next time, by 10 years, that there's enough of a movement to really have an independent, a redistricting process. Now we're entering into redistricting at the city council level, where there's a so-called commission that's independent. But that's already, in terms of the appointments, we've already seen that's already politically tainted. So I don't know. All of this stuff is an uphill battle, and it's like really hard because the guys, when the guys that are supposed to pass the changes to make the system fair are the people who benefit from it, the elected officials themselves, you wind up in the end, getting this, community winds up getting the shaft, and democracy winds up losing.
How many Latinos were appointed to the council redistricting thing?
Well, out of 15 people, 3 Latinos, right? And according to the charter, was supposed to be proportionate to the number of Latinos, in the population. But when they first did the charter revision for the city council back in 1991, at that point, out of 15, they only had 3 Latinos. Then when they did it in 2001, they only had 3 Latinos, and now they only have 3 Latinos. Meanwhile, as everybody knows, the Latino population has grown tremendously, and that's not being reflected on the membership. So that's one of the things that's creating a problem, and that as this process begins, and has really begun, we're already getting, a short end of the stick as a community.
Thank you, Angelo.
Yeah, my pleasure.